On this week's NFV SDN Reality Check, we will talk with Ericsson to get an update on the NFV market, as well as talk with TM Forum on its new leadership and views on digital migration.
Telecom Careers, the #1 global telecom and wireless job board, telecomcareers.com.
Thanks for joining us on this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. I'm your host, Dan Meyer, Editor-in-Chief of RCR Wireless News. Today, we are joined live by Bob Gessel, who is the Head of Technology, Strategy, and Portfolio Development at Ericsson North America. I'll entitle there, Bob, to talk a bit about the NFV space. Bob also recently co-wrote a NFV white paper for 4G Americas. Hey, Bob, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, Dan.
Great. Well, I want to talk a bit about, obviously, the NFV market has been getting a lot of traction over the past 12, 18 months. I'm sure you guys at Ericsson have been working on it much longer than that. But obviously, from the press side of things, it's been a lot of announcements recently. Hoping to get, I guess, your view on kind of where we are today, I guess, when it comes to NFV. I mean, obviously, in the telecom space, a lot of talk about NFV, about the potential, the opportunities there. What's, I guess, Ericsson's general view on how the NFV space has kind of evolved and maybe where we're at today in terms of NFV and SDN and kind of this whole virtualization move?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, you're correct. We've been involved for quite some time. It's a big move for the industry. We've spent a lot of time in our portfolio getting it ready. Here in the United States, we're pretty much the pioneering region for Ericsson in North America. We have the big guys, AT&T and Verizon, very, very active in the space. So as a vendor, we're fully engaged with our customer base. Most people are probably familiar with AT&T's originally Domain 2.0, UDNC. It's kind of morphed even in its marketing messages, but we've been quite involved there. It's still POC stage, I would say, for the most part. We're quite involved in many of those, both in customer specific POCs as well as some industry work that's going on, Etsy and OPNFV and others.
Yeah.
But I think the customers now are really focusing in on where can they get the first POCs from that level to trial and operationally, commercially operating.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, now, I guess as you look at the market, I mean, what are some of the big drivers for operators when they look to go towards NFV or SDN? I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of talk about the financial aspects, the network efficiency aspects of it. I guess from Ericsson's point of view, when you guys are talking to these operators, what are, I guess, some of the lead points that you're able to bring to them, say, hey, this is the reason why you should probably go down this route. These are some of the initial reasons why you might want to look at this virtualization move.
Yeah, and you probably hear from a lot of people in the industry. It's not only one thing, and it is dependent on the operator. But in general, you either have to have a motivation, like a major business issue to resolve, to make it totally justifiable. So I would say a couple of big things here in the U.S. The evolution of VoLTE and the inevitability that VoLTE is going to be a big thing for from here forward. You look at a number of our customers looking at that as a transformational opportunity. The evolution in the enterprise space, so how the carriers are serving mobile enterprise specifically, giving a point solution opportunity evolution there, like mobile private networks where you can virtualize packet core and spin it up and down with agility. I'd say another sort of small shift that we're seeing now is this whole thing was kicked off by a perceived CapEx and OpEx efficiency, and I think it started with commercial off-the-shelf server story and virtualization. Then it evolved to an OpEx efficiency story. I think now we're seeing it more turn into a service agility story.
Yeah.
And being able to spin up new services faster, being able to address niche markets with minimal CapEx and OpEx expense, and meet your time to market objectives. That's really, I'd say, a shift in the last year. We've seen pretty significant service agility focus.
Yeah, that's been something I know. I've talked to a lot of operators about this, and that's been one of the things that they always kind of keep bringing up is the fact that they do want to be a little more agile, especially competing against these over-the-top players and these other companies coming online who are using their perhaps more inherent efficiencies because they're probably more IT-based or software-based companies. To be able to compete against those guys, it does take that agility is a big part of this. So interesting aspect. And interesting, you said earlier, the fact that it does seem like the U.S. is, again, kind of leading this drive, it seems, even worldwide. I mean, I was talking to an analyst last week on the topic, and they kind of brought up the fact that even coming from the Mobile World Congress show, one thing he noticed was that it did seem like a lot of the U.S. operators were again kind of driving this move towards this virtualization space. Obviously, there's operators like Telefonica in Europe and NTT Docomo in Japan who are driving it too. But obviously, it does seem like the U.S. is again kind of at the forefront. I'm guessing, from your guys' own announcements at Mobile World Congress, I'm sure you're seeing probably something similar to that then.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can really chalk it all up to AT&T for the most part.
Yeah.
I think the vision that John Donovan put out, and he communicated that vision to us very early on. And you might recall we were selected as one of their prime partners when they launched Domain 2.0.
Yeah.
I think they definitely have pushed the U.S. market forward quite rapidly. But quietly on the side, even though the 4G Americas white paper was focusing on LTE and the evolution, don't neglect the fixed side and what companies like CenturyLink are doing, both in the IT cloud as well as transforming and trying to modernize their wireline infrastructure with NFV. Looking at things like virtual home gateways. And different security solutions and things that can only scale. But I would say beyond AT&T, there's another dimension to the U.S. market, and we're so far ahead in the deployment of smartphone and LTE that we do forecasting, continuous forecasting on mobile broadband data growth. The Ericsson Mobility Report comes out officially 2 times a year with quarterly updates.
And we just got one of these recently on that too. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that growth rate is just phenomenal. And when you sit in the chair of an operator and say, how am I going to grow my network capacity by 5 times in a year, or in several years, a few years, you've got to change something. I mean, you just can't keep going. And it's a clear message. I mean, it's inevitability at this point.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I just spoke with CenturyLink about their, you kind of brought them up there. Again, one of those companies on the wireline side more specifically, but yeah, they're doing a lot. I mean, being very aggressive in the space. And so interesting kind of see, it's not just the big guys like AT&T and Verizon, it's obviously CenturyLink and a lot of the smaller, I don't want to say they're small companies, but maybe the smaller telecom guys are being pretty aggressive as well. So interesting to see that it's really kind of gone through the whole industry, really. So it's been good. I guess, maybe looking forward a bit on this, I mean, what are some of the challenges you see as perhaps still in the way towards perhaps a broader adoption or deployment of NFV and SDN? And obviously, operators, there's still a lot of standards issues and stuff involved too. But from Ericsson's point of view, perhaps what are some of the challenges you're seeing in the market, and maybe how you guys looking to, tackle those challenges?
Yeah, so there, a couple of things come, to top of mind right away. I'd say in the industry, we're moving from, purpose-built platform in a 3GPP context, let's say, where you're integrating nodes to nodes. The whole industry is now flipped 90 degrees. Now we have to integrate from infrastructure to application, and then integrate the node to the node. So, despite all the super, accolades that NFV gets, this node level integration now shifts from the vendor to the customer. And even though at Ericsson we'll offer a fully integrated but open platform, a lot of our customers, AT&T being, Verizon, they all want to sort of get into the system integration game. Their nodes, and we see that, that's in nodes, and it's a challenge. And we're also simultaneously introducing brand new technologies like OpenStack, and even just as we're getting good with OpenStack and VMs, we're shifting to containers all of a sudden. So like building the plane while you're trying to fly it. And so, hopefully we see that as a great consulting and system integration opportunity for Ericsson. And I think we bring some of the best skills to the table for sure. But there's things, OpenStack still needs to be hardened. And we're contributing significantly to that work through many channels, not just directly through Ericsson. We've got the work to do in some of the SDN NFV integration story. And I think the biggest buzz, coming out of ETSI and World Congress is the fact that the orchestration layer is highly vulnerable to a lot of those underlying issues. So, the whole orchestration piece in the second paper that came out from ETSI kind of highlights that, and we've even proposed to 4G Americas to do a paper this year on the challenges, opportunities, challenges, and ways forward in orchestration, because what we don't want to have is orchestrators of orchestrators of orchestrators that manage both the physical and the virtual and the logical and the, oh my gosh, we have introduced a lot of complexity along the way. But again, we started on the orchestration development front more than 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So we think we're in a good position to help there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I'm just starting a report on the service orchestration aspect of it. And you're right. I mean, talking to some people already about orchestration, that is going to be a significant challenge, it seems, for a lot of these companies, because again, supporting the legacy operations, which, have been out there for years and years, they're generating money,
yep.
A lot of investment there, to then kind of bring on the new stuff and make sure it all works together. That's going to be, it almost seems like it's probably one of the bigger challenges, really, because
yep.
I'm sure the technology is going to work, but getting the stuff to work together, that's going to be the fun part.
Right, at scale, at performance level, and across multiple data centers. Because one of the value propositions of the NFV, evolution is that it's highly distributed, or could be highly distributed, and orchestrating a highly distributed system is inherently complicated. So those are some interesting challenges. Yeah, that'll be the stuff that keeps you guys up at night, I'm sure, for the next several years. But yeah, well, something's got to do it.
Yeah, there's plenty of smart guys working on this. I'm sure it'll all get worked out, but it'll be fun the next couple of years. Well, hey, Bob, definitely appreciate the great insight on the topic today. Obviously, this is a segment that is growing. I know you guys are in the middle of it all. I'm sure we'll touch base again on the topic. But again, thanks so much for the time and information today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Right. Thanks a lot.
Right.
All right. Well, thanks again, Bob, for the time there. So I recently had a chance to talk to the TM Forum, who announced the new leadership appointment of Peter Sanay as CEO of the organization. Sanay brings a lengthy resume to the organization, including C-level positions at Deutsche Telekom, Swiss Life, and Novartis. I recently had a chance to speak with Peter about what changes he expects to bring to the TM Forum, as well as what he called his 3 axes of focus for the organization.
TM Forum has a fantastic history over the last 25 years as a unique platform, actually, in the telecommunications industry plus space, as well as in other spaces, as a platform that provides a honest brokerage between parties that usually don't sit at the same table. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, competitors are not sitting at the table at the same table, and they have very clear restrictions what they can discuss if they do. And this goes for both sides, the supplier side and the buy side. And basically, we have everything at the same table here, creating something which is, doing greater good. And I think that's a fantastic achievement to have brought that to bear. And I think that's something, this platform, that is going to be much, much more valuable as we move into digital businesses in the future. So that's a fantastic asset. There's been a lot of de facto standards, if you will, that have been brought forward through these various collaborations, be it through what we call today catalyst programs, be it together that pieces of architecture or APIs have been put on the table or into the pot by the various interested groups, and then amalgamated by the best of the best technologists and architects to an overarching architecture that fits. Having been in many other industries than just the telco industry, this is something which is missing in many other industries. And that brings me to the second big asset, which I believe that with very little additional work, the frameworks, APIs, many of these architectures can be kind of standardized and neutralized in a way that they also adapt to other industries. Give you one example, customer experience management is in everybody's mouth. Mm-hmm. Everybody's thinking about that, everybody's talking about that. This is a discipline which has been worked on and implemented in the BSS OSS stack for quite a while, and very much based on the architectures from the TM Forum. So I think that's one of the things that's taking it forward. Now, I believe that this is not enough to survive in the future. Many other groupings are trying to plot same or similar agendas. Digital transformation is also a big theme. Internet of Things, Internet of Everything, machine to machine, and all that comes with it. And that brings me to the three axes. I think we should develop the forum further in the future. Not giving up anything of what we've just discussed. I think that's a real big asset. Let me stick to the base first. In the virtualization of most of the digital ICT world, not only affecting the telco business, every business in this world, whether you go to Microsoft Azure or Amazon, or I mean, nobody can evade this virtualization, the cloudification of things. And the same obviously applies to the telco industry itself, not only in their BSS type of data centers, but also in the OSS, in the core networks, which brings us to NFV and SDN and all these themes, which is obviously one of the major themes the forum and its membership are pushing forward. And I guess Nick will be able to elaborate on that a little bit later in much more detail than I can. So that's kind of a self-application of the medicine. Sure. One is preaching to other ones. But technology alone is not going to pull off the digital transformation. Digital transformation does not mean that we keep the business models and change the technology alone. There is an interdependency between the two, so that the business models are changing, they're migrating. Things that have been a solid business yesterday might not be no business at all tomorrow, or being delivered by other participants in the value chain than they have been delivered yesterday. One of the nicest examples to think of is all these travel portals like booking.com, etc. Nobody goes to a physical travel store anymore. So these people have been put out of business, and the gatekeeper is an electronic platform. Now, interestingly enough, on this electronic platform, there is no one single industry which is participating, like hotel industry or airline industry. There's a payments industry, is an entertainment industry, is all sorts of other industries which have to come together with services that are composed in various hierarchies, so that the end client, be it the business client or a user, can just from a mobile phone, from any type of electronic access this platform, make their bookings, and everything is going to be settled. Reservations are kept, people are not booking the same room. If you're booking a rental car, there's only one there, or another one is being provided. And things become part of the supply chain there. And I think that's something that's really happening when we are transforming businesses. And these decisions, how to transform a business or a company or an industry, is driven out of the executive rooms, the boardrooms of the participating industries and participating companies on the globe. So if we really want to shape how that's going to happen, the forum needs to move up. That's the first direction, into the boardrooms. Not just the engine room where our constituency are kind of the CTOs, the CIOs, the chief architects, and so on. We need to move into the boardroom with the same movement that, a CTO alone is not going to pull all the strings. The CIO alone is not going to pull all the strings. Is also there is a horizontalification, if you will, of the decision process. It's going to be the marketing, it's going to be the people from digital, the finance people, etc. Interestingly enough, looking back into the communications industry, none of these business models is working without any type of communication. So whether you're talking about smart energy, smart cities, travel, utilities, financial industries, you can pick any one of these services or amalgams of services. There is the element of communication in it. Yeah. And that puts back to the communications industry a huge opportunity, which kind of seemed to be lost in this discussion with the OTTs, who have occupied largely, squarely, and strongly created new business, but only in a part of this new digital world. And there was this discussion about dumb pipe and smart pipe. I think is a fantastic chance to really become what I call the digital dial tone. The CSPs are becoming the digital dial tone again, if they make it right, and that's something that again is at the core of the forum. So we've already covered kind of one directly, the up direction. The second one we already covered partially is what I call lateral. We have to move out of the kind of enlarged CSP or telecommunications field, which we are actually doing. We have the utilities lining up to become members. We have financial institutions lining up to become members, but we need to be much, much stronger on those axes as well. And you'll see that already in Nice, we are again opening the aperture of our engagement with other industries and bringing them together based on this digital dial tone. And you have to be able to collaborate, which brings us back to the original strengths. Where is another platform where competitors can collaborate in these ways? And the third direction is, I'd call it East. The forum is strongly centered in Europe and in the US, obviously out of its heritage, out of where the things were vibrant. But a lot of I would say, the fast growth, be it in numbers of consumers, be it in numbers of services, the adoption of new technologies, the adoption of new digital business models is coming from emerging markets, which is kind of a fancy and probably wrong thinking or wrong labeling these days. This is Asia, China, Southeast Asia, Africa, the Middle East. The adoption of many of these things is much stronger, and it's lots of innovation in complete business models, in healthcare systems, in financial systems, in mobile money, for instance, that doesn't really exist in Europe, but whole Africa and Asia and Latin America are working on that. So these are kind of the three axes we want to move without giving up all the others.
Sonny and Nick Willits, who is the Chief Digital Officer at TM Forum, also provided more insight into the organization's view on the telecom market's transition to digital platforms, how the TM Forum views standards issues in terms of NFV and virtualization, and changes sweeping across the telecom space.
It's our core today. It's probably 80+% of what we are doing. We're not going to give up any of that. We're going to enlarge that core by itself, with this digital dial tone, with the NFV, the cloudification, the virtualization of the base, what's going on. But at the same time, we have to add on top of that. So we have the core. The core itself is growing in absolute size and importance. And we attach to that the other areas like financial industries, like health industries, etc. Again, end-to-end, what we do in the base, like Zoom program, end-to-end orchestration and operation. This is a conditio sine qua non for instance, financial applications, or even more for health grades applications. We had a kind of a funny laugh last week when we talked about this. In you know, what's the big difference? I mean, a dropped call is a nuisance, right? Yeah. But if you drop a patient or a customer because of a malfunctioning electronic delivery chain on medical surveillance, telemedicine, and so on, it's a complete different dimension. Yeah, yeah. Therefore, trust, security, thoroughness, reliability of these end-to-end connections must be at a different grade. Also, if you look at autonomous driving cars, I mean, I said, oops, I oversaw that that other car, or oops, I oversaw that a young mother with a child in a trolley. Well, that's not an oops. And then you reset it like Super Mario and you've gone with a new game. Yeah, that can't happen. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it seems like again, I mean, even just looking at the telecom space, I mean, you mentioned kind of the standards issues and how important standards are. I mean, even in the telecom space, it seems like standards are still such a tough racket there. I mean, even with the move towards virtualization, standards have become even more of an issue. But then to then expand it to all these other verticals and horizontals, I mean, you're looking at, you know, trying to get these people to work together seems like an immense challenge. I mean, that's got to be perhaps daunting, but also perhaps maybe a positive for you guys, the opportunities involved.
Well, I think it's daunting, but you know, the challenge in the real essence, in the real positive essence of the word is there. And if we look at, for instance, our Catalyst program, which is kind of the real instantiation of this work, we used to have, you know, like 5 to 10 Catalyst programs running. This year in Nice, we are running 22 and had to decline an additional 10. Okay, so growth and demand is there. If you look at all the other groups, 5G, etc., they're working on very similar things without the platform which TM Forum has already established as a working platform, and that should not be underestimated. So I think that there is a real bright future there. Obviously, with the positive side of the challenge is the crunching side of the challenge to leverage all that, not to overextend ourselves. But we are a member organization, so the greater number of good, strong, healthy, financially vibrant, and keen to invest their technological and business savviness members we have, the better this can work.
Got it. Okay. Well, maybe for Nick, I guess. Obviously, maybe what was the importance of bringing Peter on for this? I mean, obviously, it sounds like you know, Peter's vision here is definitely pretty wide ranging. I mean, this is going to be a huge, maybe not a change or focus for TM Forum, but obviously, you guys are expanding your outlook on this. How important is it, I guess, Nick, for having kind of, I guess, Peter on board to kind of guide this new growth for you guys?
Well, I think it's extremely important, Dan, that we have somebody with Peter's experience here, both from the perspective of Peter's multi-industry experience and being able to give the perspective of how other industries think. It can be very easy, particularly, I think, for the telecommunications market that's typically been somewhat insular in how it thinks. It's typically bought from its own supply chain. It's typically innovated in its own supply chain. There's a lot to learn from other industries, but as Peter's described, what we're seeing is what's been traditionally a vertical industry in telecommunications now really becoming the platform for all of these other digital businesses. We're going to see the members of the forum playing very different roles in that, some that want to stick with the connectivity piece they've always done, and that will be a very viable business. Others expanding to the whole infrastructure across cloud, and others looking to go right up the stack that Peter's described into directly providing healthcare services. So the experience that Peter's bringing from those other industries is critical, and in taking us into other parts of the boardroom as well. This has been a long journey for the forum, and as Peter said, we're pretty excited. There's a lot to do, but there's a lot of opportunity as well.
Is there a concern, I guess, to make sure that you guys don't lose that kind of focus still on maybe your core constituents at this point? I mean, again, these are big changes you guys are looking to do, but it does still seem like Peter had said, 80% of your base is still kind of the telecom market. Is it important to kind of keep that focus for now, while not losing that kind of going forward?
I think the important thing to remember, Dan, is that market's changing as well. This isn't the forum serving a static industry and then trying to grow. The motivation for us to change, to be frank, as a member organization, is a changing industry. So the role of our members in the industry is changing as well. These companies are having to transform themselves into forming a very essential but different part of a much bigger ecosystem. So the industry forum for that group has also got to change with it. So if you like, we're helping our members to form a very legitimate piece of a bigger ecosystem. This isn't just about the forum finding a way to expand.
Okay. I'm guessing for Peter, I mean, obviously, again, the telecom space is somewhat traditional, and some might say stodgy at times. But it does seem like, again, this is going to be kind of helping them perhaps take that next step, and that's going to be a pretty big challenge, I guess, for you guys as well, just to make sure that the telecom guys come along for this journey.
Well, as Nick alluded, and you probably know, I've spent 30 years in the industry at various sides of the table. So from supplier to technologist to buyer to implementer. Small, huge companies, 400,000 employees, built my own business. So, and from ICT to pharmaceutical, healthcare, obviously the core thing, I've done my 5 years as Group CIO of Deutsche Telekom. So I hope I understand 5 years. 5 years survived with my own consultancy company, especially in the telco field, done financial services, insurance. And just give you one example where, for instance, the telecommunications companies are sitting on a huge gold mine, but they're not really monetizing it. User data, mobility profiles. That's a great thing, and the CSPs have gone a little way of monetizing that, trying to do it with navigation systems or cars, and maybe for marketing reasons, etc. But if you look at other industries, and we had an example of that lately. I mean, some other insurance companies, they're coming in and providing location-based and context-based insurance. If you're going, you're going down a ski slope, you can have that today, but you better know whether it's a good skier or a bad skier, is it a fast skier or a slow skier. And at the moment when you're buying the insurance per SMS click or mobile phone click, are you up and healthy, or are you down and you've broken your leg already? So there's a lot of wealth in that and value in that data, which you can monetize, but you can't monetize yourself, because the telcos are not going to sell insurance. They're going to sell the data for other industries selling insurance or financial services around it. And we can go on. I mean, these are not dreams. These are clear needs from other industries. And what's already happening also, I mean, Google's trying to do that in the UK already. So there are massive amounts of such services where the telcos, the operators, they're sitting on data that's hugely valuable. And if you're just looking inside, say, ooh, how do I monetize it? If you look around it, then you see the value. I mean, if you look at most of the incumbent telcos, they're running military grade services. Okay, well, health grade is not very far from military grade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good.
So you can monetize that, but if you don't have a health angle or telemedicine angle on these, if you don't get these companies into that ecosystem, you can't monetize.
Sure. Well, I mean, it seems like there has been some kind of steps by some of the operators in getting into some of these markets. I mean, obviously, some of the bigger telecom guys obviously have got the bigger workforces to be able to kind of go after some of these health markets or things like that too. So it does seem like it is kind of progressing a bit. I mean, do you think that there's some sort of hurdle still in the way for this to really progress farther, or do you think that it's just a matter of getting these guys to continue to support those initiatives to kind of keep them moving in that direction?
I think there are three things that need to happen. First of all, one needs to recognize that there is a new business out there that didn't exist before. Okay. So that's the transformational piece in the digital transformation. It's not just digitizing the existing business, it's transforming your business. Independent living for elderly people, relatively simple apps. Somebody's falling over, the doctor is being called. I mean, that has a huge macroeconomical impact, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one piece. The second piece is that you need to move on your own business, mm-hmm. and there are new profit pools you can access to. As new business emerge, there are new profit pools associated with that, and especially if you look, ARPUs are going down, etc. There are huge pressures on many industries. I think some of them might collapse as companies. Some partial or parts of usual value chains of businesses will collapse or transform themselves. One of the great examples is reservation systems in airlines. Sabre was the most valuable piece in American Airlines, and people really understood that the whole flying business was only there for making the reservation system and then provide that as a service to others, and they could make the prices to other airlines. Well, that's gone. It's migrated onto the booking.coms of this world, who are actually calling the prices. They are saying, okay, now let's make a loyalty thing. Let's make an action. The plane's not full. These are the hotel prices. And by the way, if you are not with us and paying 25% of your proceeds, you won't exist in the face of the world. So there's huge shifts in business, the way business is done, and new profit pools coming up. So they're not shaving off like 1% or 2% of your hotel room. They're shaving off massive amounts of money. Mm-hmm. So that's great news as well. So there are big shifts out there.
Yeah.
As Nick said, I mean, we like to be part of that what I would call the innovation forefront, which has been kind of the home turf of the forum all along. It's fun to be there.
For more of that extensive interview, please check out the RCR TV site. Well, that'll do it for this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. I want to again thank my guests, Bob Gessel from Ericsson, and Peter Sonny and Nick Willits from TM Forum. We'll be taking next week off as I will be attending the CCA event in Atlanta, but we'll have a new episode of NFV SDN Reality Check the first week of April. NFV SDN Reality Check is a production of RCR TV News, and to reach me or to suggest any topics for the show, you can contact me at dmeyer, that's D-M-E-Y-E-R, at rcrwireless.com. And to find out more on the latest news in NFV and SDN and all things wireless, please check out the rcrwireless.com website. Thanks.